Welcome to Inside the Designer Studio, episode 7. This time we have a very special guest. Before we start, my name is Veronica Diaz, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Goldman. And good morning. And I would like to invite you to please like and subscribe, and also to ring the bell so you can get notifications of all the episodes that we're going to publish very soon for you. And so without further ado, Elliot, please introduce our guest.
So this morning, I want to introduce a guest who I've kind of known for a while, although I can't say I know really well. We've kind of met each other a bunch of times over the past, I don't know, Miguel, it's a long time, probably 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. Miguel manufactures a very interesting product. And so I'm going to introduce you to Miguel Alvarez from Tripoint. And Miguel, why don't you tell us a little bit about Tripoint and yourself?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for the invite. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here this morning with you guys. Tripoint, started as a personal quest. Me being the music lover that I am, I have a strong background. I'll give you a little bit of background. My dad, used to play the violin. He also used to sing opera. My grandparent was, had a very strong affiliation, and he was a connoisseur of classical music. I grew up, listening to classic rock. Then in my mid-20s, became a jazz connoisseur. So, I have a very strong, background when it comes to a musical influence. And Tripoint really became as a personal quest because, me being the music lover that I am, I always found that no matter what component, amplifier, speaker, cable, I would change in the system, there was something lacking. There was also that ingredient of realism that you find when you go listen to live music, a connection with the soul of the performers. I always thought that, that was lacking. And, I studied, electric engineering, and actually had a background in electronic engineering, and I started studying, magnetic fields and the implementation of magnetic propulsion, and that's how Tripoint, the early stages of Tripoint, came about. Me, with a lot of trial and error, I knew that there had to be a better way to get me closer to the music. So, years passed, and I did a study of all the different conventional type of filtering devices in the industry, whether it's transformer, capacitor, coil-based, and basically, a lot was learned. I mean, I learned that there was a lot of strength and weaknesses to every proprietary way of filtering in the industry. I knew that I had to come up with some type of filtering that would get rid of noise, but at the same time, do not give me all the negative attributes that all the other conventional filtering was giving me. So that's how Tripoint, came about, and that's how the Tripoint name actually, I picked Tripoint because Tripoint basically means transfer of energy from one point to another, whether it's a sound wave, whether you're impulsing electron flow, or you're controlling, frequency. It's basically, you're actually transferring energy from point to point. So with that said, the company was first launched in the year 2008 into the marketplace with our first, Troy grounding box. If you know the story and the background of high-end audio, I was, really one of the pioneers, with this grounding. Besides me, there was only one company at the time called Granite Audio that they had a little device with toggle switches that you can control the impedance of the actual, I don't know if you're familiar with that, Elliot. Did you ever?
I've heard of it. I've never tried it.
Well, they were the first to try to do something around the grounding, but it was very subtle at that time, and I still felt that there was no serious attempt at controlling the noises in the ground plane. And basically that's, when, the Troy came to, and the Mark I came into the marketplace.
Would you say
And
the Troy is your like the product you're more proud of?
yeah, that's what made us famous. That's what puts us in, right now, we have, 3 generations of that Troy. Actually, 4, we're working on our 4th generation of that Troy product, but that's what really put me on the map. Because of the success that product have, to give you an idea, now we have 26 companies in the industry manufacturing grounding devices of some sort, using their own, technology. So, basically, it was a wake-up call for the industry. Hey, we're missing the boat, and the key to music realism, it's one of the key ingredients that's missing. It's through grounding. And that's basically how the company, came into the limelight. At the beginning there was, there's a lot of recording engineers who got, were able to experience. I was able to luckily attend one of the consumer electronic shows where there was a segment interview done by one of the, Stereophile reviewers. And actually, because at the beginning, since it was a new concept, it took a lot of legwork, because, really, people didn't understand, and to this day, there's a lot of misconception of what really this technology is all about. So, that's pretty much.
I think for a lot of us, this is, and I'll claim to be that way. I mean, grounding something was not something that I ever thought of until maybe, I don't know, half a dozen years ago, when some companies started to bring out products and made me more aware of it. And although I had been aware of you and aware of your product, I really had, at the time, never had the opportunity to experience it. But that's really interesting. I had no idea that that's how it came about. And congratulations. I think that's terrific.
Thanks.
I have just one question regarding that. Is there such a thing as too much grounding?
Well, there's, the grounding game is really unlimited because the noise is unlimited, and basically there's no such thing as too much grounding. You could do wrong. There's wrong grounding where, as an engineer, designer, I strive. The key is to eliminate the noise, but it's easier said than done.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
I was always taught that you needed one ground in a system. Are you saying that you need more than one ground, or each component should be grounded, or what is it actually?
Let me explain to them. That's a very good question, Elliot. Well, there's what we know, safety ground. By code, by electrical code, you have to have a ground, because that, everything goes to ground. Every component, every manufacturer, in high-end audio, which you plug into the wall, has to have some kind of ground schematic, because for safety protocol. So basically, my box, it doesn't mean that it's a replacement for your existing safety ground. You still have to have a dedicated ground. And I do tell my customers, hey, by all means, my technology actually benefits from having a better ground plane. Meaning that if you have a dedicated grounding rod and you go to great extents, like, to put it in earth matter, because you're trying to lower the resistance. And because the whole thing with the ground is the lower the resistance, the lower the impedance, the lower the noise floor of your components, or your system, of your system. And because of code, you still have to have that ground. What happens? My technology in the industry has been labeled as the ground box. But if you look at it, it's more than a ground. It's dealing with eddy currents, it's dealing with magnetic fields, it's dealing with 60 hertz resonance in the ground plane. So if you look at my technology, it's been labeled ground box, but in reality, it's so much more than a ground box. And I'm glad that you asked this question, because there has to be a little bit more education in the industry that this is not a replacement for your ground. This is just an enhancement to your ground plane. But of course, if you were to rate in performance wise, when it comes to noise reduction, what brings more to the table? Yeah, the grounding box, has a much more profound effect because it's dealing with so much more, issues than only the ground.
Again, are you saying that, for example, if I have an amp and a preamp and a DAC and a server and maybe a transport and a turntable and an amplifier and a pair of speakers, I was always taught that you need one ground for the system. Are you saying that you need to ground all of these individual pieces?
Yeah. Remember, there's only one ground because my box, basically you can tie it in a star configuration. You're always going to have one ground, and that ground is going to share all the components in your system.
Okay.
But in addition to that, my box, you can star ground it, you can individually ground it. It depends what kind. Every system is independent. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's nothing. The thing with the industry is there is no set standard of ground code. The only ground code that we have is, the electrician's code that we have that you have to have for safety, that ground outside your house, to protect, from lightning, from any type of, malfunction with your electronics. You have to have that for safety code.
Right.
And we're not endorsing, and we tell our customers, hey, make sure you have a ground because that's safety and that's code. We don't want to practice anything that's unsafe. But our box ties to that ground. It's all one ground, but within the ground, there's cross contamination. There's a lot going on, Elliot. There's eddy currents, there's cross contamination of ground planes because there is no set code in one particular piece of electronics. The box addresses a lot of those issues,
Well, you know what I'd like to do, and maybe this summer, if you have some time, I'd love for you to bring this stuff down. You've been to my store or my showroom. You've listened to my system. I'd love for you to bring this stuff down and maybe we can film it and talk about what each thing does. I think it would be really cool for the viewers. It has nothing to do necessarily with this channel, but it's something that I would really be very curious about. So
yeah, and it's one of the things that's on my list, and because of my circumstances this year, it just I've been running behind schedule, but it's definitely something that's in the back of my mind, and I would love to do a demo for you.
I know you have some issues going on, and we'll get into.
Yeah. We're not going to go into that.
Veronica, why don't we let's get on to some lighter subjects, and why don't we start the Inside the Designer Studio quiz?
Yes. So my first question is, Miguel, what sound do you love?
You mean music genre or instrument? But you mean more deep,
The sound that you love the most.
What sound do you love?
Well, I love the sound of piano, of the texture and a violin. I love the realism of people clapping in an environment because it makes me feel, it gives me a live feeling like I'm attending a live concert. There's many sounds that I like, for different reasons.
Okay.
To
follow that up, what sound do you hate?
What sound do I hate? I guess, piercing, high, shrill, high frequency that's not harmonically correct, that could be fatiguing. I mean, that's basically, what this, kills it for me, kills the experience for me.
So next, if you weren't doing what you're doing, what profession would you pick?
Oh, that's, I don't know. I think I found my dream job because I'm living a dream. I mean, I'm all my life, this is what I've been wanting to do, so, it's just hard. Oof, that is something that I would have to give a thought, because
Not even being some other kind of electrical engineer.
I don't know, something around the medical field, maybe, where I'm helping, people, in other areas,
You can eliminate the noise in the operating rooms.
Yeah, we're talking about audio, but actually this technology could be applied for sonar, medical, and we can go into, hours and hours. Remember 9/11 where the people were under the rubble,
Oh,
to listen to heartbeats, to search and rescue. I know that this technology can be applied in many ways because it's all about noise reduction. So
Miguel, how did you get involved with music? What's your first memory of first musical experience?
Well, I mean, at a very early age, when I was 6, 7 years old, I used to attend, where my dad used to sing opera and stuff like that, and I was part of they call in Spanish zarzuelas, where they have these plays, where they act and they sing, and I was actually part of singing and acting at a very early age.
nice.
Uh,
Was your father?
my dad got me into it. It was brief. It was my younger years because later, I got into rock and roll. When I was 9 and 10 years old, I started listening to a lot of classic rock, and I was lucky enough to attend a lot of, rock concerts in my early age, and I've taken a loving to different type of genres throughout my lifetime. And
Father,
I
a
guess
professional singer?
not a professional singer. He was good. He started with the violin. He played the violin, all his life, all the way, through college and university, and then came to a point that he got frustrated because he wanted to play more than what he could hear, and basically could always wasn't able to develop, that talent, and I guess gave it up, after university. And but he started singing opera and doing plays, and and that's how I got involved, through him. I'm in a very early age, but he in some ways, a lot of that's me, comes from him, from my grandparents and him.
Of course, of course.
Mhm. Well, I actually have a question regarding your musical taste since you started with zarzuela. Is that something that you still play, even to demonstrate your speakers?
Oh yeah, once in a blue moon. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I do play it, because it brings me, memories of my childhood, and so I do play it. It's not my top, because I've developed other tastes, and in music, and but I do play it, once in a while. I have some records that actually belong to my dad that I still have in my collection, that.
Nice. Oh, well, let me ask you a question regarding women. So with this thing, the wife acceptance factor, is that something you think is real? Does it affect you when you design your speakers? You take it into account?
Well, in my case, it becomes even harder because, when it comes to wife acceptance, the wives don't want to see cables, and they want everything knit and tidy and pretty. So basically, I have to become a magician, and I have to try to hide. Some of my grounding cables are heavy, they're bulky, so I have to, try to hide them in back of the racks. So because it is important, it's something that, definitely, cosmetic and beauty is part of the hobby. They go hand in hand because of,
Unfortunately,
people don't want all these wires, and they don't want all this clunkiness in their living room. So I mean, the living space, becomes critical. So
wires,
I do take it in consideration, but sometimes, it's hard to, to hide, so.
as I said, wires are not the greatest thing for most people in a house. It's a necessity that you need to have in a system. But many of the better cables are very large and realistically impossible to hide.
Yeah.
And it's something that, if you're using a family space, it's kind of difficult. It is difficult to have giant wires lying around. So, Miguel, do you have an idol, a mentor, a hero in the audio industry that has influenced you?
In many ways, I've been lucky enough to rub elbows with a lot of fine designers. Yamada Sands of Zandon, Javier, Guadalajara from Wadax, Robert Coda, from Coda. Ralph Krebs from Cesario Horn, and basically, I'm open to learning because we don't know everything, and basically there's a lot of talented engineers and designers in the industry, and I mean, I could tell you stories of Yamada Sands from Zend, and actually say, hey Yamada, what do you think about this wire? And him putting it up to his ear, and just rubbing the outer mesh, and by able to listen to the dielectric material, he'll tell you, well, this cable instead of another cable. I mean, so some very interesting stories of people that I respect very much, that I think that they have a great ear, and that's one of the reasons that they've been successful at their craft or with their brand. So I mean, not one particular hero, not one, but there's many people that have influenced me in some way or the other, and I hope that I've been an influence to others too, that I've met. So
I can definitely say from my experience that, and I'm not making fun of anybody, but the wire segment of our industry has been home to extreme, I'll put it a better way, to many colorful people. And from my first experiences with Bob Fulton and Noli and Bruce Brisson and on and on and on, I think that it's a very interesting chapter of high-end audio, and maybe a subject for a whole nother video someday.
Yep, and I think it's one of the Achilles heels of high-end audio with the wire, because if you look at all the scientific principles in wire, the resistance, capacitance, and it's hard to make wire that actually achieves close to perfection in all categories. You always have to give in one area to the other. So it's a segment that it's very interesting, to say the least, and we still have a lot of learning to do, when it comes to wire technology. So I'm sure there's going to be more in the future with other ideas.
And what do you think is the biggest myth in high-end audio?
The biggest myth, okay. People say, and this has been my experience, and and I'm not saying by no means that this is not important, that the room is the most important factor in high-end audio. I kind of disagree with the myth, and this has been my experience. I think the loudspeaker is the most important component in audio, and the reason is a loudspeaker has to you have to be able to have something in phase. The design has to be flawless, in order for everything else to shine up the pipeline. And I say the loudspeaker because if you remove enough distortion from the loudspeaker, and that through the electrical parameters, through the grounding parameters, through the actual variables in the room when it comes to room acoustics, you actually, the speaker behaves completely different with the room, by removing noise. I've actually seen systems where it's almost like an eclipse, like a sun eclipse or a moon eclipse, where everything has to line up, and with the power is close to perfect, the grounding and the noise and all the mechanical isolation, not only the speaker should disappear, the actual walls and the room should disappear. And I've heard rooms that are not ideally, that have windows, that have reflective points. I've actually seen rooms, because of noise rejection, actually disappear, not speakers. I'm talking about the illusion that you close your eyes and you actually feel that you're sitting in a concert hall, where the room, you feel there's no room. The walls have disappeared, the ceiling and the roof has disappeared, and the back walls, there is nothing. And it can be done. And that's probably the hardest thing to achieve, because a lot of systems can achieve disappearing the loudspeaker, but if you can disappear the room, then you're really onto something. But it's very hard to do.
I agree. I don't necessarily believe that the room is a myth, but I do believe that the three things that really have to happen and this is, my philosophy and my opinion, is the room, the speaker, and where you're sitting all have to be done correctly. And I also believe that there is only one exact spot in the room for the speaker to sit. And it's not an easy thing to find. And it's one of the things that, unfortunately, in audio, I don't think enough people understand. And what I mean by that, and I don't really want to go into a 2-hour discussion, when people go to a show or they walk into a showroom, they're looking for something that is an unrealistic expectation. I'll put it that way. We've talked about, and you and I have talked about this too, about having a mature setup, having something that people have had, the owner or the listener or the dealer or the designer, having the opportunity and the time to work with the gear in the room in order to make what you're talking about happen. And it can't happen at a show. And it very rarely happens in a showroom because things are not fixed. They don't stay there forever. Nothing, no component, no speaker, no chair goes unmoved, where it can, if you have a listening room in your house, you can work on it for days, weeks, months, whatever it takes to achieve that. Having done many shows, and I'm sure you have too, we're lucky if we have 6 or 8 hours in order to set up a system. And we're doing that after being usually exhausted from moving and schlepping and unpacking and building and wiring. And then we're expected to achieve perfection. And it's just not realistic. Audio is, my expression, at least as much perspiration as it is buying the gear. And, in that point, I totally agree with you. If you work in your room long enough, you may be able to, I won't say you can, you may be able to achieve the goal that you're talking about.
Yep. And I agree with you, Elliot, 100%. Show conditions are hard,
Impossible. It's impossible.
Yeah. So
you can see good at a show, but you'll never see, like, for example, I was out in Seattle a few months ago and visiting a client who's been working in his room for over a decade. And he's got an amazing system. One of, I don't like to use the best word. It's an amazing system. And you can tell how much effort and work he's put into getting this system to work. And I had not heard his speakers before and really not heard his electronics before, but it didn't really matter. After 5 minutes of sitting in the chair, you know that this is really something extraordinary. And I was really thrilled. I was thrilled because so many times in my life, I've been invited places and been horribly disappointed. So let's leave that for another subject. Okay, so Miguel, let's have a little fun. I certainly don't wish you any harm. Tonight is your last night on Earth. Okay.
Wow.
What are you eating, and what piece of music are you listening to?
What am I eating? I'm a meat and potato guy. So, I guess I'm gonna have a filet mignon.
That's what I'm cooking for lunch.
Yeah, that's what you're cooking for lunch. And then, man, what am I listening to? Wow, that's I don't know, Elliot. I mean, that you really got me.
You got to have some favorites, some stuff that you
well,
like.
I mean, there's too many favorites,
Pick one.
and it has to do with the mood, it really does, on a daily basis on my mood,
You're gonna die tomorrow, so
well, well, again, I don't know, maybe I need to listen to something upbeat, maybe some dance music. I don't know if I'm gonna die, I need happiness, or maybe dance music. I don't. It's hard for me to,
So where do you see yourself or your company in the next 5 years?
That's a good question. COVID has changed, the world. So manufacturing is even more challenging than it was, 3 years ago, because of, I deal with a lot of fine precious metals, and materials are hard to get, but the goal is, eventually to, as I get older, all my product is handmade, and there are no PC boards. So, they're proprietary filters that are hand built and and they're hand winded, and basically, I want to see how I make this process easier, so I can have more volume, because right now our capabilities of manufacturing is about 50 boxes a year. So I need to expand to make the manufacturing process a little bit easier. That'll make my life so much easier, and that way I can showcase the technology to more people, because I believe that this is only the beginning. And I mean, there's a lot of awareness that needs to take place, and basically, the more of my devices that I can sell, the more people can enjoy the fruits of my labor.
Is
So
it possible to automate some of the processes that you have?
been working on building a machine, for many years, and and speaking to many engineers, and there's still some challenges, that we haven't been able to overcome. But you never know. We actually overcome some challenges in some of our designs this year, in some of our boxes that I thought, 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you would ask me, hey, is this possible? And I said, no, I haven't, there is no, technological solution for a problem. So, never say never, and my goal as a designer, and, is to keep pushing the boundaries, because I feel that if I'm not pushing the boundaries, then, I'm not doing my job,
Right.
And basically,
Yeah.
let's face it, Tripoint is a labor of love, and basically it becomes, like mundane. It becomes like a, you know, in order, what creates excitement for me is, finding, new frontiers, new technologies, new ways of getting better, of and being, we have some exciting stuff coming, so I can tell you that we're gonna set the bar even higher, so.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it would be nice, obviously, as a boutique company to be able to make your process um, more, I don't know, I don't want to use the word, that word. I was going to say efficient. That's not really the right word. To, make your process simpler, and therefore you could make more product and hopefully even bring down the cost of making these products by doing it. And therefore you get more exposure. I think this is, a universal problem for a lot of the high-end industry, which I don't think a lot of consumers understand when they look at pricing. And Miguel, and if you can comment on this as well, but people don't understand that when you're building really high quality, small batches or in small quantities, first of all, it's really hard to do. Second of all, if you have to have subcontractors, most of them are not interested in this type of work. People that finish stuff or cut stuff or whatever they do, CNC machines, painters, finishers, they want to do large quantities of average quality. It's much easier for them to do than make 10 perfect pieces of something, of which the rejection rate is really high and the costs are really high. And of course, when those costs are high, that cost is handed down the line to the consumer. So if each piece in your component is a limited production, high quality device, when you put them all together, it gets expensive. There's no way around it.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest obstacles that I face, especially after COVID, the machine shops and the different, sources that do the parts for me, they want to do more quantities. Nobody wants to deal at a smaller scale. And also it's harder to find the craftsman, the perfectionist. We're living in a world that everybody, is looking for an easy buck, and people don't want to deal with something, so extreme. So they much rather do it. There's other jobs that are much easier that don't require the tolerance, with these parts, or, so that's a challenge, Elliot, So the goal here is, and I also have customers call me and say, hey, I love your stuff. I've heard it, are you going to have, an entry box that you're going to release? And you're right. It's something that the industry in general has to do a better job. How do we, make product that's affordable for more people, so more people can benefit from that. Something to look forward.
Well, maybe we can find those ways. Anyway, I want to thank you for coming today, Veronica.
Well, thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Elliot. And thanks everybody who's watching. And I just want to remind you to please like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notifications of the new episodes that we have for you. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye, Elliot. Bye, Veronica.